Hello there, fellow maker. Welcome to the shop. I am so stoked for this project. You have no idea. This project and the new video course that we have available, it's something I've been working on for a couple months now, and I'm really excited to finally show it to the whole world. See, this project is an example from my new Fusion 360 video course. It's an instructional course. It's about 4 hours long. It's over on our website and it's super cheap. It's for beginners. It's just the stuff I know about Fusion 360 that I use for making props. There's a lot in Fusion and I pared it down to just what you need to know, especially if you're just getting started with Fusion 360. If you want to make props for 3D printing, just like this little guy right here. So I really hope you go check it out. Like I said, it's designed for beginners, so if you've never touched the software before, it's just for you. And the very first lesson is how to download and install Fusion 360 for free. So it'll get you started, get you 3D modeling things like this, and I have a couple other example projects. I did this Hellboy bullet as an example project in the course, and of course Luke's lightsaber from Return of the Jedi. Both of those are full tutorials, as well as this guy right here. All the little parts are printed out. Whoop! This is the noisy cricket from Men in Black. This has been on my bucket list of props to make for such a long time. And I finally made it, and it's looking really great. These are prints, these are resin prints that we took off of the new Anycubic printer we have, the Photon Mono X. It's been a real champ for us. This is the smoky gray resin from Soraya Tech, and it printed awesome. And it sands really nicely too. Right now, I'm taking care of some of the sort of printing artifacts. These pieces were laying flat on the bed. There's kind of like a little foot sticking out there, so I'm just using a file to get rid of those. Like I said, this was an example project from the course, and I show how I modeled this whole thing. Well, since then, I've made some more changes, and that's kind of the process with 3D printing. It's prototyping. You build a prototype, you print it, you decide what you want to keep, what you want to change, and then you print it again. So this is my second iteration. What I've done with this one is I split it into more pieces to make it easier to print without supports. And then I also added a little cavity so I can put lights in here. Woo! This little part here is designed with spots for magnets so that this can hold the lights and then slide right in there and then hold it closed with magnets. I'm really excited to put that all together because magnets are magical. So for now, all that's left to do is to do a little bit of cleanup. This part's a little chunky. So we're going to do that with some sandpaper, some needle files, and we'll get this thing ready to start putting it together. There we go. These spots need to be nice and flat. Nice. It's a good idea. Highly recommended wear a dust mask if you're going to be sanding these resin prints. This is not stuff you want to be breathing in. Next, we're going to do a little assembly. I've designed the parts that are going to go together. I've designed them to have a peg for registration, and I'm going to use this 1/8 inch diameter steel rod as my pegs. So we'll cut those down to length, and I probably have to drill these holes out. They look like they shrunk a tiny bit in the printing. I've got these mini bolt cutters here that are awesome for many reasons, but look how simply and easily they cut through this steel rod. Whoop, I'm sure I'll find that. I'll cut a few of these. I think we need at least 3 or 4 of them. I'll cut some extra. I'm sure to lose them. I want to point out real quick that this hole right here and this hole right here were modeled the exact same diameter. In fact, this one is actually close enough that that'll fit in there. They were modeled the same, but because this one was flat against the printing surface like that, the artifacts left over from the printing process have sort of made the hole a little bit smaller. It's just something to keep in mind when you're designing stuff for 3D printing. Fortunately, I have this drill bit here, and I can just make this a little wider. Nice and gentle, and then this should fit right in. That is satisfying. Do the same thing on this guy. And now these should, oh, they fit right together. Look at that. So good. This edge right here, there's meant to be a gap there. So that'll stay that way. I think I have to shorten my peg a little bit, but that's really good. I'll get these guys drilled out and we'll get ready to put this together. Those mini bolt cutters leave this sort of sharp edge on the rod here. So I'm just gonna clean that up to make sure I don't poke myself or anything. And I've got these fancy pliers that hold something on the end like that, which come in handy all the time. And I'm just gonna sand it nice and smooth. Okay, our surfaces are prepped and the pegs and the holes are prepped, so now we can mix up a little epoxy and glue this whole thing together. This is super instant epoxy. You've heard of 5-minute epoxy. This is like 2-minute epoxy. I'm convinced that they made this for me. We heard that Bill guy's impatient. Actually, I got this tube from Frank Ippolito like 4 years ago and I'm still using it. Thanks, Frank. All right, we shouldn't need a ton of epoxy. All these parts are pretty tight. Very good. And then this is, actually, can I get a clamp on that? It's not required that you use tiny, adorable clamps, but if you have them. And then add this part here. And another tiny, adorable clamp. There we go. Just make sure everything's square. Looks good. Gonna wipe a little bit of extra glue off and then let it cure. I've been working on the edge here to get this to fit perfectly. Oh, so satisfying. It fits right in there. I got both sides ready to go. Nice. Oh, satisfying. Snap. So the grips are at a point where I can clean them up. And I'm going to set those aside. I'm actually going to make a mold of these so I can cast them in an opaque black urethane resin. We'll work on those in a little bit. This is all sturdy. The glue has cured. And now I want to get this part fixed up. I've modeled these little holes on both this side and on this side to hold some tiny little magnets. And that's how this is going to get held in place. All right, let's get just the tiniest amount of glue. A little bit of glue in there. I have this pair of non-metallic tweezers that should keep this from sticking. There. Just making sure that I keep track of which side is facing where. That's gone forever. When you hear it hit the ground, you know. Okay, you go that way, sure. There, perfect. We only lost one. Time for the other side. Okay. Mash it in there, perfect. Perfect. Magnets installed. Let's see if they work. Oh, that click sounded so good. That is in there, easy to pull out. This is where the LEDs and battery will live. Look at this, ready? Ah, I'm doing it again. Yeah. It's the little things in life that bring so much joy. Next up, I want to figure out the trigger here. I designed it to have a pivot. There we go. And a little room for a spring. You can actually see in this transparent resin, there's room in there. I do want to make sure that I have a tapped hole. There's going to be a screw holding that. So, got an M3 tap, and we're just going to add some threads. That's for the screw. We'll use this little M3 screw, but it has to be able to fit through here, so I need to widen that hole a tiny bit. That should be able to, good, that can spin around that. That's what we want. All right, I have a little spring. Let's put this together and see if it works. It might be too long, but we'll see. Yeah, it's a little too long. I can cut that spring a little shorter. Nice, all right. The screw goes through and gets, oh, that feels so good. Yeah, it works. That's my first try on that mechanism there, and it worked, which makes me very happy. Pew, 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 pew. Like I said, I'm going to mold these, but I want to make sure that the holes are the right size. Yeah, they look like that. Before I mold them, so I don't have to do any extra work once they're out of the mold. Those look good. Actually, they fit perfectly, like I planned it that way. The other moving part is this hammer here, and it's another just sort of through hole with a screw as an axle. Let's get that tested out. Very nice. Oh yeah, that's like just the right amount of friction too. I like that. That snaps in there. The grips snap on a little bit. That's looking mighty fine. I noticed that while my magnets work great, when I push down on this, the whole thing levers up. So I want to add some sort of mechanism in there to hold this down. I've got a little piece of styrene here I can use. There we go, our little piece of styrene. All right, here's the plan. I've got some double stick tape here, and I have a little piece of styrene that I want to glue in there, and I'm going to use this to feed it in by sticking this down temporarily. There we go. Just a little glue. Okay. And then we'll spray some accelerant in there so it sticks immediately, I hope. And in we go. I hope that did it. The operation seems to go exactly as I planned it. We'll let that dry and then we'll give it a shot. Okay, we can see our little addition in there. And now, oh yeah, now we're talking. Look at that. Now it wants to stay put. That's wonderful. This is a case where now that I know that, if I were to model or fix this model, I would add that in the first place. This is all part of the prototyping process. This transparent resin's so cool looking. I love being able to see like how the trigger is working in there. That's so cool. Okay, now everything's ready for cleanup. I can take all the parts off, do all the sanding. I'm going to make sure I mask up. I don't want to breathe in this dust. We'll get everything ready for painting and molding. Did all our first round of sanding anyway with some 320 grit. This resin sands so nicely and it's looking really smooth. I did have to do a little bit of filling. I used some super glue mixed with baby powder to make a little putty and fix this little corner here. Sanded that smooth. I also used some air drying filler to get the gap between the parts here that I glued together. Now I've got a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, some gloves. I'm just going to wipe these parts down, try and get rid of all that dust so that we can get ready for priming. And to do all that, I've got this board of sticks. It's very technical. These are just bamboo skewers, and I'm going to put all the parts on there in some fashion, like that. So I can spray them and hit every side and let them dry. I let the primer dry overnight and it looks really good. I'm very excited with how these parts turned out. Of course, they need to be a really shiny chrome finish, so we need to sand them very smooth. And I'm going to start with the grips. I'm going to make a mold of these. So I've got some warm water here, and I've got some sandpaper here so I can do some wet sanding. I'm going to start with 600 grit, go up to 1200 and see if we want to go any higher than that, but I do want these to be very shiny. I'm almost just trying to remove all the primer from the high spots. That way I know I've fully sanded that area. It's actually kind of nice sanding something so tiny. It isn't taking very long at all. This is 1200 grit. I think that's about as high as I'll go. And then we'll use some plastic polish on this. Next step is this plastic polish. This is the same stuff I use to refresh my car headlights. It's just a matter of rubbing this stuff on and then buffing it and then wiping it all off. This is, of course, just a different form of sanding. These look great. I'm very excited. They're ready for molding. And just for reference, we're going for something like this. This is Raised Blaster. I made this years ago. And this is cast out of a mold using black urethane resin. We're going to do the same thing, but we want this nice shine. And when this comes out of the mold and won't get painted, which means we can shine it up afterwards, it'll look awesome. So for the mold, I've cut up some pieces of just some sheet plastic here that I'm going to use for the mold box. And then we're going to make a 1-part mold. Just going to dump silicone all around this, and we're going to suspend it using these pipettes, because this is the same thing we're going to use to sort of push the resin in there. So it'll leave a cavity in the silicone shaped like this pipette. And then this will get glued on there. I think we'll use just some hot glue for that. Oops. And there will be a little hot glue sort of thing there in the mold, but that's fine. This will all have to be sanded after it comes out of the mold anyway, so we'll just have to clean that up. Putting a second one on here as an air vent. Well, that's just glued to my finger now. A little messy. I can clean that up, but it looks good. That'll go in the mold like that. Now we just glue these down. Make sure everything's nice and vertical. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Now we can just build a box around these and fill it full of goo. Almost like glue. I don't want to fill it full of glue. Oh. Yeah. Box doesn't need to be pretty. It just has to hold all the liquid in. Time to mix up the silicone. We've got Molmax 29 NV. Very easy to mix. And I've done the math. I need about 175 milliliters worth. So we're going to pour that in our cup. Measure the weight so that we know how much catalyst to put in there. It's been a while since I've made a mold.
Hope this stuff's still good.
Sure do hope. It's been at least a year since this has been sitting on the shelf. Is that 170? Yeah. Need 20 grams of this. Nailed it. Yeah. All right, then we mix and the clock is ticking. This NV stuff is, NV means no vacuum. I'm still gonna put it in the vacuum chamber because I have one, but it's a lower viscosity. Ah, what's that? Ew. Where'd that come from? Did that fall off of me? Anyway, this stuff mixes very easily because it's a lower viscosity than something like Molmax 30. The whole reason why you would vacuum your silicone is to get bubbles out of it so that later when we cast pieces using a pressure pot, those bubbles don't collapse and become a problem. Transferring everything to another container to more fully mix it. It's so easy for this stuff at the bottom to not get mixed in. So we go in this bigger container here that'll help with vacuum degassing, but also I can more thoroughly mix this whole thing. In you go. Now we pull the air out. Good to go. Now I'm making this a 1-part mold, I will have to cut it open. And I'll do that tomorrow when this is fully cured. So I'll have to cut a seam around those, but we'll get to that when the time comes. This is a very quick and dirty way of making a mold.
Banana.
It does look like banana cream filling. Oh.
What about banana runts?
Oh man, I love banana runts. Fake banana flavor. I don't like fake strawberry. That's no good, but fake banana, sign me up. That ought to do it. Nice and full. My math was spot on. Feeling good about that. To figure that out, the volume, I measure in centimeters, the height, length, and width. Just multiplied that together. That gives me the milliliters. It's my favorite way of figuring that out. Small numbers. I used a calculator too. All clean. That means the silicone is fully cured and we can get our grips out of the mold. First thing we do is get rid of this box. Although I'll keep these side pieces because we'll use them to clamp it together. There we go. There's our little nubbins in there. And like I said, I'll keep the side pieces. These will be used to smush this thing back together. So we'll set those aside. And now we've got to get our pieces out of there. They are fully encased. And we're going to do that with some fun tools, including this guy right here. Look at that thing. Yeah. I got to cut them out of there. And I have just a normal scalpel blade here. And I have an X-Acto blade that I heated with just a blowtorch and bent it into this curved shape. You have to heat it because if you try and bend it normally, it'll just snap. That means this blade is now annealed. It's very easy to bend. So this is kind of a throwaway thing, although I've had this one for a while. Just know that this is no longer very durable. It is still quite sharp. When I cut into my mold, it'll leave not a flat surface between them. It'll leave a registered surface so that when we clamp it back together, it'll want to come back in roughly the same place. I'm going to cut just a seam down this side, and hopefully I can get the one grip out this side, and we'll do the same thing over here. We're not going to cut it fully open if we can avoid that. So let's give it a go. I'll do one cut that's kind of a wavy cut on the outside here. And then I'll come back and try and cut all the way to the 3D printed part. This wave here will, again, help this want to go back in the same place. Now I'll go to all the way to the part. There we go. Now see how I'm pulling apart with my hands? That's what this guy is for. If I put that in there and open it, it creates a little room for me. And then I can use freehand to go in here. Now I'm just trying to cut a seam along the 3D printed part in there. Going really slowly here, making sure that it's as clean as possible. I am, of course, scratching up the 3D printed part, but that's okay. It's already done its job. There are a couple more spots we have to cut. If we look way in there, this is the through hole. So we got to cut that. And then there should be another one. So I haven't quite made it to the bottom yet. There's the other one. There we go. The other sprue needs to be liberated as well. I think this can come out. Perfect. There it is. There's our piece. There's our air hole. And now when we squish this together, we can fill it with resin. Time to cast our grips. I've got a little baby powder for the molds. I like to put a little bit in there. It helps as a mold release, but also it helps the resin creep into all the details. It's the main reason why I use this stuff. Just a little bit, kind of dust the inside of the mold, and then you want to get rid of the extra. You don't want any little pockets of powder in there. That'll create a void. That would be a bummer. Next, we just use some rubber bands to hold it all together. And then we can mix up our resin. I'm using smooth cast onyx for this one. This is Onyx Fast. Cures in like 3 minutes. It also cures jet black, which is exactly the color we want. Before I mix that up, I want to show you why we use the tips of some of these to make our ports. I'm going to sort of inject resin in there, and these fit perfectly in there. There won't be any leaking around it. We'll have to force the resin in, and then it'll come out the air hole. And that's when we'll know that it's full. Side B, side A. Mix vigorously. Scrape the sides. Onyx doesn't mess around. This stuff cures and gets hot very fast. Take this thing and suck up the resin. All right, then we go in here and squeeze. There we go. One down, fill it up. Let's do the other one. And there we go. I'm continuing to squeeze as I pull it out so that it fills both of the sprues there. We want to make sure there's like a reservoir of resin to fill in any bubbles. You go in there. So this guy's going to squeeze all our little air bubbles until they are no longer able to be seen. Actually, they should go into solution. Fill it up. Whoop. All cured. Let's see how we did. Truth be told, I left that in there for a couple hours, so it should be perfectly cured. Come on out, you. Oh, these are all stuck together, aren't they? There we go. That looks pretty good. We'll have to just resculpt those little bits right there, but I don't see any bubbles, which is the only real concern. Let's get the other one out of there. All right, just like the tiniest amount of flash, I can just remove it with my thumbnail. Oh, that feels good. So there's our originals, and then here are the copies. Poop. Shine it up. Oh, it looks so good. So shiny. Our grips here are all done, and I really love how they turned out. I love how much of a shine I was able to get just by buffing that after a little bit of cleanup work. Here's the Noisy Cricket. I didn't show you, but I did sand all of our primer away. I sanded this down to 600 grit. I was able to see some little fine 3D print lines that I got rid of. I'm going to prime and sand that one more time, but let's see how our grips fit. Oh, like a glove. Let's see the other one. Oh yeah, boy, that looks awesome. That looks so good. I can't wait to put this all together. All right, we'll set these aside for now, and we'll hit this with more primer. I actually went and grabbed a new primer. This is a fine surface primer. It's for models and better for like small details. So I'm gonna hit this with a couple coats of this stuff, I think, before doing our last bit of polishing before paint. I let my primer dry overnight, and it looks really good. I'm not gonna do any more sanding. I'm very excited about that. Next step then is just paint, and we've done this before. This is how we did the Aragorn lightsaber a little while ago. It's going to be lacquers. We've got our Alclad gloss black for the base coat. We'll do 2 coats, a dust coat and then a wet coat, and then we'll hit it with our chrome paint. We're going to go with Spaz Sticks Mirror Chrome today. Look at how glossy this is. We've been letting this dry for a couple of hours. And I am so pleased. This may be my best finish so far. And I think it really comes down to the tedious sanding I did. Either way, it's ready to get the mirror chrome. We'll put one good coat of this on and let it dry. Everything is so shiny. Oh, I'm really excited. I did my best to be patient with this one. I usually rush through this kind of paint job. What I did was I primed it, I let it dry for a day, and then I hit it with the gloss black, and then I let it dry for a couple of hours, and then hit it with the chrome finish, then I let it dry for a day, then I hit it with that clear coat. I did 2 coats of that, and I let it dry for 2 whole days. I never wait that long. But it was the weekend and I let it dry and I played a whole bunch of Satisfactory instead. We both did. It was awesome. But now it's totally dry and I can handle it, and that means we can start putting all the parts together. And that's what I'm the most excited about. Let's start with the little trigger. Okay. Tiny screw goes in. Trigger goes in. Cool. There we go. Oh, yay. Well, that was easy. Next is going to be the grips, and I've got to tap these 2 holes. Got an M3 tap right there. Got some really short screws here. They're only 4 millimeters long, but I had to shorten them a little more. I just used the belt sander to do that so that these don't meet in the middle. Fits perfectly. And this should go right into those threads. And it does. This is really starting to look like a thing, Brett.
So cool.
And the other side. It's so satisfying when something just goes together the way you planned. Oh, there's something about that black on there that makes it look so much more finished. Oh, it's so good. Okay, the hammer, that fits in there. Perfect. Just tight enough to kind of hold this in place, which is nice. Now we can slide it in. Yeah, that click. Oh, that's so good. All right, we have a couple more things to do. We have the electronics and the lights and everything. We also have a couple of decorative screws to add. Let's add those decorative screws. 1 decorative screw. And the other one. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Boy, that looks legit. For the lighting, I will put some LEDs in there. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to handle the diffusion. These holes here, the light coming out is either a blue or a green, depending on the photos you look. I've got this green gel I want to use. I just need to cut a little rectangle that'll fit perfectly in there. I need to figure out the dimensions. So first, we'll do the depth. About 30 millimeters. And then the arc, this arc here is what we're going to need for the width of that. And we'll measure that by putting a piece of tape in there. Right there. Right about there. That should get us close. Right there. Let's just measure that. That was 38 millimeters. So I need a 30 by 38 millimeter rectangle. Good enough. So hopefully that'll fit in there. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's a little long. I can trim that, no problem. And also what I'll do is I'll sand the back of it so it diffuses the LEDs a little bit. Here we go. That's friction fit. It doesn't need glue or anything. And then once there's light in there, we'll get some of that. Oh, I guess that's the last thing I have to do is put some lights in this thing. For the electronics, I'm going to repurpose some stuff. I have some of these surface mount LEDs that run on 3 volts, and they are apparently white. At least I left those notes on for myself a while ago. And then for the battery and switch, this was ripped out of a toy of some kind. I don't even remember. But I'm going to use this battery holder. I'll just make it smaller to accommodate these little batteries. And then this switch will turn it on and off. We're just going to have to Frankenstein this whole thing. Who knows where that landed? Here's what I have so far. I made a little box out of styrene. I just super glued it all together. These bits will fit in there eventually. Yeah, like so. But I need to round the top of this over a little bit so this whole thing will actually fit into the body of the Noisy Cricket. All right, time to assemble my little homemade battery box. That will go in there with the little hot glue. Isn't that cool? I went in and removed some material here. I had to make room for my switch to fit and for the bottom of the batteries to fit in there. I just used the rotary tool to carve out a little bit of my print. Now I'm going to sand this so I have a nice surface for gluing. We can glue that down. Sand this whole thing. I'm going to glue LEDs to this as well. Just a little super glue. Carefully put this where it has to go. There we have a little battery holder. Got these little flat surface mount LEDs ready to go. I'm going to glue them in place with a little hot glue. There we go. This one's getting glued up a little higher than the other one. I have to leave room for the lip that I added on the inside of the body, the little lip that goes right there. So this is up in the air a little bit. Here we go. Now we just have to wire all these together. First we attach some leads to the switch. Perfect. All right, the switch gets attached with some hot glue. Let's connect the battery to the switch. Connect that guy. Not perfect, but the lights work. Calling it good. All right, switch still works. Always a good sign. Let's see how it looks. Oh, that's pretty good. Boy, it's so hard. The battery pack in there just takes up so much room that it blocks off 2 of the holes, which is a bummer, but the rest of it looks pretty good. I may have to revisit how I do all of that. All right, I took a little time off camera to rework this whole thing. The batteries now live under the lights. There's one over there and one over there. I've used some aluminum tape to make the contacts, and solder doesn't stick to aluminum tape, so it's a little janky. I've sort of pressed some fittings together or some connections together, but it mostly works. Now something else I want to do is I've got this little piece of foam I'm going to put on there to diffuse the light a little more. Just hot glue that right on, and then we should be all done. There it goes. There we go. Okay, this should be a little nicer. Yeah, that looks a lot nicer. Nice, even, diffuse light throughout pretty much the whole thing. That's what we're going for.
It looks so good.
Oh, my. There we go. In the future, I could have designed all of this into the 3D print and it would be a lot more reliable. And that's what I might do if I did like a version 3 of this. But for now, I'm going to call that pretty darn good. And I just love this little thing. Pew, pew, pew. I am so happy with how this turned out. It's so tiny and shiny and glowy and perfect. I love it so much, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like I mentioned before, I've got that new course out, the 4-hour video course on Fusion 360, aimed at beginners who want to make props. If you've never started anything in Fusion, I'll show you everything you need to know to get going. I hope you go check that out. You can learn how to model stuff just like this. In fact, the files for this and the other projects will be included in the course, the STL files, if you want to print your own. That'll be included in the course, along with instruction on how to model your own or model almost anything all on your own. So I do hope you go check that out. I've worked really hard on it. I'm super proud of it. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. A huge thanks to the members of our Extra Credit Club for all of their support over the years. It's because of them that we can afford to keep making videos. We thank them so much for it. You can join down below. There will be a link to either Patreon or right here on YouTube where you can help us out, get a little extra free content every week. That'll wrap it up for our tiny little prop. I'm gonna go find a nice safe place to put this. Both safe from damage, but also safe from anyone who might want to use it for ill purposes. Thanks again, and we'll see you in a bit with another build. Take it easy, happy crafting.
There's a cat yelling the whole time. Willow. Say Foamsmith. Foamsmith. Foam. Foam.